All right, bro. Excited for this conversation. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Definitely.
Um, your story is pretty incredible. For those who don't know, you were an ex-Marine Raider, U.S. Special Forces, an absolute military force to be reckoned with. You're a man of God. You're head of security at our church. You know you minister, you preach. You've got a YouTube channel now that
Mhm.
you're starting with like good content, outdoors content, hunting content, spiritual as well,
Yeah.
tactical.
Mhm.
And we've become friends over the past few years since we met. And yeah, it's just been amazing to get to know you. And, you know, your story is very unique from people, that I've met in my lifetime. And what you've experienced, what you've accomplished, um, is incredible. Is incredible. So I'm super stoked for your upcoming content and channels and such. But today, I want us to first kind of start off with your story, get into some of the military experience as well. Um, how you kind of transitioned out of that too, because a lot of vets who come out of the military are struggling
Yeah.
are struggling with trauma, are struggling with identity issues,
Big time.
reacclimating to civilian life after such time in the military. And you've gone through all this. You've had God with you throughout it. And you're a very whole, sound, mature, and stable individual emotionally, despite going through some pretty intense um, experiences. So I'm excited to dive into all that. But first off, kind of maybe just let us know how you grew up. What was your upbringing? Um, uh, yeah, and then we'll go into the how you got into the military.
Yeah, man. And thanks again. This is awesome. Well overdue. So I was born and raised in Alaska. I When I was a baby, I was 2 months old, was in a car wreck. We were hit by a drunk driver. Mom was killed on impact. I was actually sitting right beside her. I didn't have a scratch on me. The other vehicle, I think two, maybe three of them died. I'm not really exactly sure. Uh, and then my dad, he survived. He was driving our vehicle, and you know, I grew up with him as an alcoholic. He says, when I was later on in my life, we talked about it. He said that he started drinking, after that. Um, I don't know if he was drinking before or not. Either way, like, I couldn't blame him really. I can't imagine, going through something that excruciating, your new wife after you have a newborn, tragically dying with you right there.
Hmm.
So, I learned to show him a lot of grace, after that. But early on in my life, I was raised, with my dad as an alcoholic, and, there was a lot of strife in my home, my former stepmom, a lot of like, you know, unhealthy, verbally abusive stuff. Um, and yeah, I grew up in Alaska though. As soon as I would leave the threshold of the door of our house, it was just vast outdoors, you know, the best place to be a kid. Me and my brothers and my, sisters would just go get lost in the woods all day, every day. Just, grew up hunting, fishing, picking berries, gold panning and stuff. Moved around a lot because my dad was in the Army Corps of Engineers, so he got transferred different places. After when I was 12, I moved from Alaska to Tri Cities. Got
Okay.
saved here when I was 17. Moved again with my dad to Tennessee, where I graduated high school, and then I went off to the military a couple years later.
Wow. So definitely not necessarily an easy upbringing on uh, in terms of you know everything you went through and what kind of most people would consider a stable upbringing. It was pretty traumatic in many ways.
Yeah, I was kind of an angry kid.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up to be an aggressive kid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely don't exert that now. So there was some
Yeah.
transformation that occurred, but So that's how you grew up. And how did you end up getting into the military? Because you mentioned to me that, you weren't necessarily looking to join the military.
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of a funny story. When I moved to Tennessee, all I wanted to do was come back to Tri Cities and be a hunt and fishing guide. And it was either my junior or senior year. I come out of we're at lunchtime, bell rings, go out of the chow hall or the cafeteria, and there's a Marine recruiter with his table set up in the hallway. Um, all he just yoked out of his mind, tatted up, not saying a word, just presence. And, no one wanted to talk to the guy. I didn't, but I was a little intrigued, like dude looked good. He looked dangerous. He looked aggressive, but he was super professional, well put together, and just not trying to talk to anybody. So I'm in the middle of the crowd. We're walking out, and I see him, and he kind of does this. I'm like, no, and he's like, hey, come here, kid. And I'm walking further, and he's like, I'm like, no, and he's like, no, you come here now. Like stops the crowd. So okay, and I go over there and start talking to him. He starts poking holes in my plan. Long story short, it gets me to realize that I don't have it all figured out. And I go home that night. He strangles my number out of me. And I pray and I'm like, God, if this is something that you want me to do, give me the desire to do it because I don't have it right now. But it was starting to get on my mind, right? It was very intriguing, that conversation. I prayed that right before opening up the word in Philippians that day.
So you knew Christ at
Yeah.
this time.
Yep. I got saved here in Tri-Cities at 17 right before moving to Tennessee. So now I'm in Tennessee in high school. And, I pray that prayer and I open up the word and I read Philippians 2, verse 13 in the NLT. And it says, for God is working in you, giving you the desire to obey him and the power to do what pleases him. And I was like, all right, here we go. And it just became a tenacious, ruthless desire.
So you saw it as the will of God.
Yeah.
To go down this path.
Yeah. It was a life-changing prayer, a very dangerous prayer where I completely surrendered my entire, perception of what I wanted. I felt and I still to this day, so many years later, look back and like that was God calling me to his plan. And so when I went to go pursue the military, I felt that there was the favor of God on it. Because it was him presenting to me, this is where I'll bring you. But he also gave me a lot of cautions. This path, so many verses I have in that same Bible I just mentioned, they're all highlighted and bracketed and all these stars and stuff. I still have it. There's so many of them that I have marked the same strategic way to go back and remind myself of that season. And they're like, there's going to be a ton of suffering. It's going to suck. But I'm calling you to a certain place, to certain guys that I want you to pour into. I want to use you. And I'm like, I want to be that guy. I want to be used.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you joined the military, and I had never heard of MARSOC or the Raiders until I met you.
Yeah.
A Marine Raider. I had watched, I forget on which cable network, but about the Special Forces training. So the SEALs, the Green Beret, they're in the pool. People are basically drowning, people are quitting, getting, picked off, trimming the fat. Yeah. And so I met you and I started researching Marine Raiders because Special Forces, haven't heard of this. And it's actually been around only since about 2006. So that's why there's not a lot of kind of legends and tales and movies and books and documentaries or just as much public awareness per se.
Yeah.
And obviously the culture of the Raiders is a little more stay under the radar.
Right.
But so when I started finding that out, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy has done all this. This guy went through this. Like, And then anytime we met and hung out, I was always picking your brain on like the experiences and everything. So I want to dive into a little bit of that because I feel like a lot of people, you were in the Marines, you were in the military, you're a Raider. The dots don't connect
Hmm.
for most on like
Yeah.
what you've actually done
Yeah.
and the experiences you've had, what you've gone through, and all these things and the skills. And so, how did you end up joining the Raiders? Well, how intense is it to become a Raider? Like, if somebody is 16 right now and they want to join the Special Forces, they're looking at the Raiders. Like, what's the difference between the Raiders and the SEALs and things like that? Could you just dive into some of that?
Definitely. Well, so the Raiders is you know, the Raider is the title. The organization is MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command. It's essentially a subcomponent command of SOCOM, Special Operations Command. So each branch of the military essentially has their own, you know, unit that they contribute to SOCOM. The Navy has the SEALs, the Army has the Green Berets, the Rangers, Air Force has the PJs, and SOAR, CCTs, and so Raiders is just what the Marine Corps has. The Marine Corps is a pretty professional and great organization, but it's also very toxic, and a lot of things just don't make sense. It's like an abusive relationship. You hate it, but you love it, and you can't get away from it. and and so the thing is, it took MARSOC so long to stand it up, or the Marine Corps to stand up, because they're like, everyone's special, no one's special. And so there was recon, force recon, all these things, but it wasn't until '06 that MARSOC was stood up. And in order to, if someone wants to be MARSOC, they got to be willing to do a whole enlistment before they even get a chance to try out.
Mm.
So what I did is, it took me a couple years to even get accepted into the military. I kept getting denied and had this whole process, and just, I kept getting this resistance, but eventually God opened a door. I took a 5-year open infantry, no sign-on bonus contract. And I went to boot camp. I did one deployment in the infantry as just a basic.
Open infantry means you could be the janitor at a camp, or like what?
You're going to be an infantryman. So that could be a rifleman, an assaultman, a machine gunner, a mortarman, anything within infantry, O3, whatever.
Okay.
But so I did one deployment as an infantryman, just bottom of the barrel, brilliance in the basics, learning the basics, which I wouldn't change because you need that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took selection after the first deployment, and I went and tried out for the battalion scout sniper platoon, and became a scout sniper. Did the whole sniper deal, deployed as a sniper. And then after that is when I put in my package for MARSOC, because now I'm senior enough. MARSOC's the only component of all those components I mentioned of SOCOM that you have to essentially do a whole enlistment before you can get a chance to try out. Green Berets, SEALs, all that, you can do, like Green Berets have an 18 X-ray contract where you can go in off the street. MARSOC, you don't have that option.
Wow.
So I knew about MARSOC before, and I set myself up for it.
Okay. That was your kind of goal.
That was my goal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's what I feel the Lord really put inside of my heart.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did the sniper thing to set me up for success. And then from there, I brought that experience over to MARSOC. And
what was the selection process like? Like Hell Week for the SEALs, and how intense was it to actually get selected?
Yeah. So the Marine Corps has a lot of really hard schools, and sniper school was arguably the hardest thing I've ever done. That was before I went to MARSOC. So I had a good baseline of what really suck looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And, MARSOC, you go to we call it ANS, assessment and selection. Back when I did it, it was, I believe, 6 weeks. You had a phase 1 and 2. I won't go into details of it because of different non-disclosure agreements and, carrying on the traditions and making it fair for people to go. But yeah, it's hard. You like you better show up ready to rock and roll and outperform everyone. But it's not just the physical specimen that they're looking for. They're primarily looking for problem solvers, people that can, think under stress, perform under stress, team players, guys that aren't abrasive. We don't need the guy with the 1,000-yard stare at everyone. We want thinkers, right? And we want team players. And so there's all these different data points, like hundreds of different data points that are being collected on every candidate. And you're always being observed, always being watched, always being data gathered on you. And so these are the kind of guys that I served with, guys that made it through that. So we started with, I think, 243 when we started phase one ANS. And I think it was 40 some of us who made it to the end and got selected.
And that's just to begin.
Yeah, just to even start
next
training.
Selection.
Yeah, you pass ANS, it's like whatever. You go back to your battalion in the grunts or whatever, and they're like, "Oh wow, that's such a big deal," and it is. But within MARSOC, it's like, cool. You haven't even started training yet.
Yeah, wow.
All you did is earn the right to start training.
So then you go 10 days with like no sleep, monitored every moment. When does that segment come?
Yeah, so you're talking about something called Raider Spirit. So after a selection, you come back and you go to ITC, which it stands for the Individual Training Course. It's a 9-month course, 5 phases. Starts with phase 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4. Each phase has different focuses. What you're referring to is called Raider Spirit, and it is essentially like this Navy SEALs Hell Week. Theirs is 5 days. Raider Spirit, it's a 10-day evolution. You're running missions the entire time. Training missions, it's training, right? But you're running 120 pound rucks, full mission load, no sleep, 10 days we had 3 hours of sleep total in 10 days.
Gosh.
You literally, what we call it, visit the spirit world. Like guys are walking up to trees, talking to trees, like instructors having to grab you and like redirect you back to your team.
But you're still required to make very grueling decisions, input data, process it.
Yeah.
Go forward.
Everything you're doing is being analyzed. I fell asleep while running. I fell asleep while carrying a boat. I fell asleep while rowing a boat.
And then they beat the living daylights out of you. Yeah.
Well, usually you wake up to an arty sim in your front of your face or a flashbang, right by you.
Gosh.
And then you get blown out of your security hall and you have to go because someone decided to like their face fall asleep on their, machine gun or something.
Oh my God.
It's just so funny, man.
It would flashbang you?
Oh yeah, all the time. Arty sims, flashbangs.
Wow.
I did it. I mean, for the instructor cadre, it's so funny, but, man, it sucked. Raider Spirit sucked. Yeah.
120 pound rucks.
Yeah.
How many miles are you hiking that?
There's no way of telling. I mean, and also to be fair, you're running missions all day, all night, nonstop. You run a mission and then you plan another one and go and go and go. And so you're rotating, one time you'll be carrying the 240 machine gun. One time you'll be just carrying an M4. Like, you rotate.
Yeah.
What
it's always
the
movement dynamic. It's not just kind of like one.
Yeah. So you could have a 120 pound ruck, say if you're the radio guy carrying a bunch of radios and batteries and maybe a machine gun or something and then the next time you could be carrying, a lot less gear as a different role in the team. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, going through swamps, like guys going in over their head in swamps and pulling them out, seeing gators and snakes and
oh my gosh,
dude, is wild. ITC, it's not just that green side patrolling. There's a lot of other stuff like SEER school, medical stuff. The direct action phase 2 is very, very well done. It's modeled after CAG.
What's CAG?
CAG is Delta. So
Delta Force?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So, it's, very dynamic. You're expected to make very quick, intense decisions and, in the house, you got to be focused, do the flat range is really cool. There's a lot of, they'll play like classic rock and, kind of loosen you up as you learn how to shoot effectively. Cause you got guys in MARSOC of all backgrounds, right? You got guys that were refrigeration mechanics or from the band coming in. Like I was from, I was a sniper before, so I had
Yeah.
experience, but maybe all my habits may not have been right. When it comes to CQB, I knew how
Yeah.
to shoot a long gun, but not a pistol. And, and so you got guys from recon, you got guys from the grunts, and they bring this really cool mesh, together. But
So
yeah.
you get through that, you get selected,
Mhm.
your tenacity and resolve and character just gets hardened into an absolute specimen in only a year's time. Like,
Ye-
how much does it change you going through that? Or does it come kind of after?
I think really, different people have different perspectives. I think it really brings out what's already in you and kind of guides you the right way. But there's a ton of growth. I mean, you can't go through that much resistance in life and not have growth, and so yeah, it's a lot of hardship, but you learn so much, and you learn that there's always someone better, always something better, more to learn, and it also gives a lot of humility to you. And then as you go to the teams, it's just like be a sponge, soak everything up, listen, learn everything you can, be hungry, you know.
Hmm. So you get deployed as a raider. Um, and you're jumping out of helicopters, you're landing, you're riding vehicles off of helis, you're going into Taliban infested villages in the middle of the night, taking out top Taliban leaders. Like you immediately go into some of the highest missions in the Afghan war. Like what is one experience, I guess, of just that demonstrates the level of like gear you have on, the level of preparation, the level of intense, life or death scenarios when you're coming into a terrorist run building or village and you're taking out some of the most top terrorist organization people on in the entire area. Like what is one that kind of stands out maybe?
Yeah, so I while I was in MARSOC, I deployed to Lebanon and to Afghan. Uh, so I was actually in Lebanon, and one of my good buddies on the Afghan team got blown up, and so they needed a replacement, and I went and I replaced him. So me and my EOD tech, we essentially hitchhiked on C-130s to get to Afghan, and that night we were in combat. That mission was the real deal. Call it Team Raider, and so I got the opportunity to do that. I had chased the dragon of combat my whole career, and I really wanted to get out of the military, but I wanted to get out fulfilled, and you know had this whole kind of like identity issue that a lot of guys in the military struggle with, of like, I can't get out until I'm you know combat, right? And so God gave me that, to the fullest. It was the real deal, the real deal. And yeah, I mean, I did that time, and both those deployments were very different, but the time in Afghan was more kinetic in nature, very kinetic actually.
So you'd plan raids, you were involved in the planning of the raids
Yep.
and you would conduct them at night.
Yep, everything was at night. Um, I was the point man and team sniper, and so I had a large part in planning the routes that we would move. We'd insert here, and the helicopters. Everything was what we call a half helo assault force raid. So we would take helicopters in at night, everything 100% at night. You know, insert wherever, and then move to, whatever target compounds throughout the night. And then we'd get picked up by a bird somewhere else, and we'd be
But
out
you
before
get
the
picked
sun
up
rose.
after doing what?
Right. Yeah,
Like,
it's a good
there's a
question.
lot of details there. There's a enter and then oh yeah, you're gone. You
And then we leave. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty much all direct action raids, on certain guys. And we have our MARSOC has our own way of developing target packages. which I won't get into. But we are the only SOCOM entity that is a fully, you know, a fully enabled MSOT, Marine Special Operations team. We can deploy and organically within our team develop all our target packages. So we were just wrecking shop. And a lot of that is due to the enablers on our team that aren't even raiders, but we don't look at them any differently. And so, yeah, we plan these missions, certain ways. And then okay, we're going to go to this compound and either find this person or see who's home. And yeah, just
And the gear you mentioned you had a scope that was like unbelievably expensive just for one like infrared
yeah,
scope or something.
yeah, it's a nighttime optic that I would put in front of my day scope on my long gun. It's called the iNod.
And how much
And
does that gear cost?
dear Lord, I mean, a lot.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
A lot of money. Yeah. Um, yeah, that thing burns through batteries real quick. It's awesome though. Yeah. The,
Because you're literally being commissioned the highest grade tactical equipment that the US military has its hands on
I would definitely
as
say that
special
about,
forces.
yeah, it was definitely a sigh of relief coming from the grunts where it's
Mm,
the opposite, where
mm,
you get gear that the army has had for the last decade,
mm.
and you just are angry. But yeah, within MARSOC was nice because I say I got to experience the best and worst of MARSOC. My first team I went to was just, you know, the guys on the team were good, but I had really a real bad experience, like personally and stuff from my team commander and stuff I was trying to work through at home. And MARSOC, one of the things they say is family first. Like I did not experience that at all
Mm.
on that team. But eventually I went to another team and that's where I went to Lebanon and Afghan and just it had the time of my life, with good leaders, you know.
So
So
let's get into that too, because you mentioned the kind of family first thing, and I know you've gone through a lot of even during your military time, the trauma you experienced wasn't necessarily just from combat, but
exactly.
actually stuff going on at home and that you had to deal with, you had to process, you had to, you know, really allow God to bring you through. Could you dive into some of that as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. So when I when I was in ITC going through the pipeline, I ended up getting married at the very end of the individual training course, which is the 9-month course. Really dumb decision, like barely knew this gal. I essentially waded through the red flags and got married super quick. You know, part of my issue was so I was a Christian at the time. I had saved myself for marriage sexually. I was a virgin, and but what I was struggling with was pornography. That was my secret sin. I thought I had it kicked. I went a couple months before getting married. Without viewing pornography. At the time, I didn't know anything about deliverance or anything like that. Other than what you read in the Bible. But this was my secret sin. I get married a few months into being married. It comes back up, right? And I viewed it a handful of times, and I wanted to talk to her about it. But one time that comes up in a conversation, she said, if I ever found out you looked at pornography, I'd divorce you. And I'm like, oh, shoot, how can I? I literally was right in that moment wanting to bring it up. And so I'm like, okay. And so it brought I had these open doors into my marriage, right? You know, she had her own things, talking to guys and emotional affairs and stuff. But I was really working on myself. I started these different programs, these online courses, and started getting a lot of freedom in this area. Well, she said that the only way that I could get free of pornography is if I get kicked out of the military. So there starts to be this manipulation that I need to not fulfill my contract And literally right at the beginning of my reenlistment in MARSOC, I need to now get kicked out of the Marine Corps. And I'm like, whoa, no, God has called me to be faithful to everything, faithful to my family, faithful to where he has clearly called me, as I shared before, into MARSOC, right? It was a miracle that I was there in the first place. And so I go to my team and I'm like, I need help. Like, this is what I'm being faced with. And behind closed doors, just me and my team commander, who was my peer in the teams. We went to ITC and ANS together. He was just an officer. He said, like, just a velvet dagger to my back. In front of the team, he'd act like he was helping me, but behind closed doors, just me and him, be like, no. It escalated to the point where she said that she's going to kill herself if I didn't get kicked out. So I'm like, hey, I can't go to this training. I need time. Let me go to counseling, recycle me to golf company. And he's like, nope, you're a mortar leader. You're a sniper. Like, I can't replace, like, we need this mission and I can't, it's getting too much into the workup to replace you. Figure your stuff out. Okay. Kind of understandable, but like, did you not just hear me? She's saying she's going to kill herself. Like, you have plenty of time to replace that capability. Anyways, I get put in this position where I'm coming home from work and there's, all these pain medications spilt everywhere. She's laying on the couch with foam coming out of her mouth and an empty vodka bottle. And, I go up and I check her vitals thinking, like, did she OD? Did she kill herself? Like, she's been saying, I'm having to hide medications. I'm having to hide razors, all these things. And I'm bringing it up to my chain of command and I'm not getting help. And they're just like, no, you're going to leave. I check vitals in that situation. Everything's fine. So I call 911, and after calling her family, and I call 911 and I'm like, hey, this is what's happening. Come check her out. And she immediately realizes I'm calling 911 and is like, oh, no, I'm fine. Everything, like, no, don't call them. Get off the phone. Everything's fine. They'll take me. And they did. They took her to a psych ward. And it was just so much stress, on top of, being, everything I'm trying to do. And then at work, I'm like asking for help. I'm seeing the chaplain. I'm using every resource I have, getting counseling. And then at work, they're like, he said, you're going to be on the bird, to go to California for this course. And I'm like, I can't. Recycle me. I need help. And then I'm just like, it got to the point where I'm like, you know what? Or because he said, if you don't get on this bird and go to this training, I'm going to NJP you for disobeying a direct order, going AWOL, and like
What's an NJP?
Good ninja punch. It's a non-judicial punishment. So like, take my rank and like try to kick me out of the Marine Corps. Essentially, he and he's like, she wants you to get kicked out of the Marine Corps. I'll help you.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, brother, like, did you not hear? I'm asking for help, dude. The guys on my team were supportive, but the thing is, like, I was kind of indecisive of like back and forth, but like in that situation, what do you do? If they're not going to recycle me, if they're not going to like give me the time, it's like, you cannot appease everything. You can't appease a suicidal wife like that's telling you to get kicked out, and you can't be there fully for your team. And I sure as heck can't focus on my own recovery and my own health when I'm being pulled these different ways. And so, eventually, I essentially pissed a lot of people off, trying to do the right thing. And a lot of it stemmed from my former issues with pornography, not taking care of that, because it brought these issues up. It made, and I married her. The day I married her, I went on a run and I'm like bawling my eyes out because it was, I instantly realized how miserable and how much of a bad decision I made.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was the note.
The day of your marriage?
The first day. And I'm telling you, brother, it was so bad. So bad. And, so yeah, I ended up, after I'm getting threatened by my team commander of all these issues, I say, I'm like, you know what? Why wait? Just do it now. NJP me now. If this is the support, if this is what this community is about, screw it. Why wait? I'm not getting on the bird. And that day came and I didn't. I showed up to the sergeant major's office, knocked on the door, and he's like, I had a feeling you'd show up. So it's not like I just went off and did my own thing. I showed up respectfully. And that day they took my rank from me. I was just about to pick up staff and I got busted down to corporal.
Staff sergeant.
Yep. I was just about to pick up staff sergeant. And I had a good reputation. You know, I was one of like 6 guys that got to go to 2nd Raider Battalion, you know, from our whole ITC class. And that was the sought after
Did
battalion.
many guys, were they married? Did they have stuff back at home, or was it pretty?
No, I mean, that's not really a factor in that. It's more of like your performance and how things work out.
But to like balance being in MARSOC and
It's definitely a place for single guys to thrive. Yeah, they call it the divorce force. And now I'm being threatened of being part of that statistic. But I'm fighting for my marriage. Obviously, I put myself in that position. I got my rank taken from me, fighting for my family. You know, it's not like I just said like, oh, screw you, you know, lady that's trying to destroy my life, you know. Like I'm trying to help her. I'm trying to be there for myself, trying to be there for my team. I end up getting recycled. I go to golf company. I show up and I'm just kind of angry. And this new team is like, they're like, hey, dude, we heard that you're going through something crazy. We don't really know, but whatever you need, we're here for you. And bro, like, dude, it brought tears to my eyes. I was like, okay. And dude, I had this support dude from this new team. My new team commander, bro, he was an OG enlisted raider. Then he went and came back to be he went through the whole process again that I just explained to be an officer, a raider as an officer in the same team. There's actually a book, he's in it, called Level 0 Heroes. It's like the only MARSOC book. But anyways, so I came to this new support system, man, this new team. And dude, I was like, you know what? This is it, you know? And I'm like, I'm going to be faithful to my family. I'm going to be faithful to this team, you know? And I started working through things, man, getting counseling, bunch of freedom. And then I end up going on deployment. Come deployment, you know, and how I said I experienced the worst and the best of MARSOC. The worst, obviously, is what I just explained. The best is now what I'm walking into. And I have this support network. I'm trying to do things right. I'm on deployment. About a week into me being on this deployment, I find out that, you know, my wife at the time is cheating on me. So I go to the embassy and I start filing for divorce because there was all these other issues that, and I had explained, like, I cannot take this type of stuff anymore. There wasn't physical adultery before that I knew of, but it was very walking that line. And yeah, so I ended up divorcing her because of adultery. And, you know, throughout the divorce process and the paperwork, it came out that, you know, she was having affairs, like sleeping with at least 2 different guys and using the funds I was sending home to fund those affairs, you know, to kind of throw it in my face. But really all it did was give me closure. But it was really hurtful, man, because, you know, I also went to Afghan. You know, I told you during that deployment, I went to Afghan. I'm fighting an actual war, but the war was welcoming because of the immense betrayal I was dealing with, man. Everything I had was taken from me. You know, all my assets were taken and stolen. Like I had this Airstream camper taken, stolen. She spent all the cash. Like, bro, instead of coming back with, you know, savings to restart my life, I came back extremely in debt with everything gone, bro. Everything. My truck was destroyed. I had to scrap it for $500 cash. Like I was locked out of my own storage unit, bro. Just like, how, like, what did I do? You know, I was working on these things, you know, and, but yeah, man. So
Wow.
yeah, that was,
It's like you were in war, but the real war were those personal struggles in your own marriage
that was,
while you're raiding,
yeah.
going on missions, you know, and that was more difficult. How did you cope with that? How did you get through that while you were on deployment, while all the stuff was hitting the fan?
Yeah. I mean, so naturally you're going to have the temptation to just, you know, numb out and all these things. with whatever. Um, the way I chose to do it is I was afraid of coming back from deployment and completely falling off the rails and like abandoning God and all these things. Like I knew that was a very like let's be real, those are
Mhm.
the thoughts that you face and these type of things. And so what I really focused on was facing it. I started another program called Pure Desire. Life changing, life changing. I did their 7 pillars program, which is really focused on like healing from sexual addiction. So that's when my real healing from pornography started happening. And at this point, it's been over 5 years since I've viewed pornography, and about 3 years from freedom from alcohol. And, Pure Desire was a really big part of that, and so I would face it, and we'd get back from our raids in Afghan, and we'd have a certain amount of time before we'd go to the chow hall as a team, and and then debrief our mission. And I would always go and take a 30-minute shower in the dark because it was the only place I could be fully alone.
Wow.
And I would turn worship on, and I would make myself feel it for 30 minutes. I would for 30 minutes, I would have worship going, and I would just face it and mourn it out, bro. Bawling deep, deep. And dude, I bet a lot of deliverance really took place in those times, where I'm inviting the Lord. It's not just this like weird healing, like it was like intentionally giving this to God, to God.
Not just like purging your emotions, expressing them, but like having them processed by
Yes.
God, not just expressed by you in a venting way.
Yeah. It was like they were being poured out, and God was bringing healing, like the
Transmuting them.
love of the Father.
Mm,
Yep, I
yeah.
allowed the love of the Father to bring healing to me, but I had to like process this and mourn it.
Hmm.
And yeah, like I said, it's not like I, started going through these things and, was like, oh, screw her. I'm going to divorce her. I don't have time to deal with that MARSOC. Like, no, I fought for it, you know? And, but also there comes a point where, and I don't condone divorce by any means, you know? Um, but also I don't really want to be living a life, even biblically, right? Where I'm being cheated on. My
Hmm.
wife is sleeping with other guys. It's not really a good thing.
Yeah.
And so I stayed faithful other than the pornography thing. And now I have this fresh desire to, when I do get married in the future, I know more what to look for, and so I've waited and I've been intentional and patient and just waiting for the right one.
So that alone time with God is really, if you hadn't had that, where do you think you might have gone psychologically, emotionally, spiritually?
I would have fallen off the rails.
Because, a lot of the times, like you mentioned, it's like numb it, suppress it, start using any sorts of substances to feel better in the short term. Addictions develop. Like
Dude,
that's a huge principle of healing, of getting through struggle is that face it,
yeah.
process it.
Part of that is so when I got back from deployment, dude, I was getting some sort of counseling or something 5 times a week.
Wow.
I was just pursuing it, dude, and I couldn't eat. I
Was
was,
it effective?
yeah, I mean, I was just trying to stay afloat. Essentially, I was like treading water. I would go to some churches. I was also it was COVID when I came back from Afghan, and so the whole world is just shut down. I'm
Mm,
driving down the road. It's like a zombie apocalypse. I'm like, what is
yeah.
happening? And so I'm getting doing Pure Desire online. I'm doing counseling through the Raider Battalion, our battalion counselor, who that was one of the most she was like life changing for me. Her name was Jennifer, and possibly helped save my life.
Wow.
Because I would be like, I have these issues. I did this. I did this. Boom, boom. They'd be like, stop. Like this,
Hmm.
it's not you. I was so manipulated, so messed up in my mind from her, from my ex, of like, because she wouldn't get counseling. She didn't have the issues. I have the issues. She's like, we don't need marital counseling. You need counseling. You're an addict, you know? And I'd go and I'd get counseling. I'd be like, I have these issues, and be like, stop. Like, yeah, porn is bad, but like, you're not this person. And
If you
so
had isolated during that time, you likely would have just gone down this deep hole of believing these things about yourself
Yeah.
and not being able to actually process it. I feel like that's such a big, um, you know, indicator of the importance of not only community, but connections where you can actually share the deepest aspects of your heart,
Right.
of what you're going through, not just to God, which is important, which is essential, but actually to others, in an actual counseling relationship or what have you.
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of vets, even who haven't gone through that level of personal struggle, but are going through trauma from combat or identity, I think it's the isolation or feeling like I don't need help or help's not going to help me.
Yeah.
That can be a trap, huge trap.
That is huge, bro. Yeah, because a lot of, veterans and people in general, struggle with, help's not going to help me. Even in law enforcement, I see it now where someone will have maybe a suicidal, child, and I'll refer him to crisis and be like, well, crisis doesn't do anything, is their viewpoint.
Mm.
It's like, okay, throughout life, everyone, there's these different resources that we have access to, but are they actually doing anything? Are they actually working? Right. And, a lot of them did work for me in the military. I maxed them out, you know, but ultimately it was the healing power of God that really brought freedom to my life. The rest was, were tools that I believe he used. But man, if I would have isolated, if I would have just, drank myself into sorrows and, you know, just vegged out every day and been absent and, you know, it just, there's no way. There's no way I likely would have been dead right now. Who knows? The veteran suicide rate is insane, but instead of walking in that death and destruction and addiction and bondage, now I'm walking in freedom and dominion and power, and seeing other veterans and first responders set free from these just things that are destroying their lives, their marriages, and based off of what I've already shared, like I've already been down those roads, you know, like I know what it takes to come out of that, and so it's all God, man, all God.
So what are you planning to do going forward with your channel and everything? Because you're only 4 months into it,
Yeah.
but
So
you've been
starting
cruising.
out, initially it was very just kind of, you know, start getting out there a little bit, which is very uncomfortable for me. Very uncomfortable. Have always been very much into being in the shadows and the silent warrior
Mm,
mentality. MARSOC drills that into me. The sniper community drilled that into me of like, you don't take pictures, you don't be seen, this and that.
yeah.
So this is very uncomfortable for me.
Mm.
I'm not like a SEAL that's wanting to write a book every time I tie my shoes, right? But I do feel the Lord stretching me, like, you know, and so where I see it going is, initially it was just get out there and share some knowledge and with some of the spiritual mixed in, right? Not necessarily indirect, but not the focus.
Hmm.
You know, during the hunt, I really felt like the Lord was telling me now is time to take the shift to power
Mm.
and displaying, like being bold. And so the next message was the sermon that, I got to preach at Hungry Gen. Um, and, just sharing like, hey, this is the truth, like I don't want to hide behind a title of a raider. I don't want to hide behind a title of a sniper or whatever,
Yeah.
like law enforcement, anything like those aren't my identity. My identity is as a child of God, you know, and that is the number one focus is helping like and let's be real, like people are hungry. Like you experienced the new age, you traveled all these countries looking into these all these crazy stories you did, right? It's like we can't deny that the supernatural is real.
Hmm.
And we have people that are hungry. We have people in real trauma, people actually killing themselves.
Yeah.
So I can't now it's time, I feel the Lord saying to not hide behind being cool, but allow him to move in power and directly confronting trauma,
Mm,
directly confronting these issues that our best friends are really dealing with.
yeah.
I can't be too concerned about my perception anymore.
Yeah. That's so good, dude. And I even like early on when I started making videos about, my journey, the new age, things like that, even some of the, destructive elements, deceptive elements that I kind of fell into that
Hmm.
seemingly in the moment don't seem bad, but
Interesting.
only coming out of it I really realized, wow, it wasn't just like a belief
Yeah.
someone might have and it's, cool, you believe that. But there was an effect it had on my life. And so, me coming out of it and coming to Christ, so much healing, so much liberation occurred
Hmm.
that it was obvious to me that those things I was doing wasn't necessarily light and in what it was packaged as, what I thought it was. And that was my experience.
Yeah.
And uh, people go to that for a path of healing, especially nowadays when kind of religion is seen as just outdated. I think it's much more appealing. These kind of new forms of thought, which after having studied it, isn't new. A lot of it, it's not new forms of thought. Now there's people like, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist who kind of, infuses some of the spiritual element with, oh, this is seen from a neuroscientific perspective. So that kind of brings a scientific frontier element to kind of validate some of the phenomenon, but not in the full sense that people take it to be complete fact in
Yeah.
terms of manifestation and law of attraction and these types of ideas, which aren't necessarily new. But I find a lot of people coming from trauma, coming from, even vets, because when I first started making videos, as I was about to say, a wife of a special forces guy reached out to me on Instagram and wanted to talk on the phone because the community there, the husband's community, was all falling into like new age modalities,
Yeah.
going on, psychedelic trips to heal the
Yeah.
interior
Like
trauma
the
and
ayahuasca and all that.
ayahuasca and all these things and DMT. I've smoked it.
Yep.
I smoked weed daily for years and LSD, MDMA in a very psychotherapeutic way, not necessarily only at raves, but I literally did it in my dorm room in a controlled environment in a specific like a clinical, in a sense, environment that I was reading about them doing studies on MDMA to improve, psychological um, uh, things, psychological phenomenon and issues. So like I was experimenting in that way to see if it's psychotherapeutic. And a lot of vets are getting into this because it's
Yeah.
becoming popular.
Hmm.
And religion is seen as this like outdated thing because people aren't seeing like the power.
Yeah.
People aren't seeing it actually have an effect. They're just seeing like, really you think a serpent talked to a woman, whatever 1,000 years ago and said this and like all these,
Fables and
it's
myths
all fables and myths. And it has no direct application until you realize that Christ rose from the dead. The Bible claims he is still alive. He rose from the dead, ascended into heaven. He is a conscious being. God is conscious and can be related to.
Yeah.
So if God is conscious and can be related to, and he created us and our soul and knows everything about us,
Yeah.
who do you think has the answers to the most complex, traumatic, psychological issues, emotional issues that we have?
Maybe who created us?
The creator of our souls.
Yeah.
And he's alive
Yeah.
and came in the form of man as well. That's
Yeah.
another element, because the Buddhist perspective, it's very much about dissolve your ego, identity.
Yeah.
The Tibetan Buddhism and even Hinduism, dissolve the ego, rid yourself of all desire, then you heal suffering. So your personality almost becomes a enemy of your spiritual evolution. So for years, I would withdraw into the wilderness, but to dissolve my ego, my very identity, my very personality, because that was quote unquote an illusion
Yeah.
from the Buddhist perspective. And after becoming aware of that illusion, then you you don't have the trauma. You don't have these things that the personality contains within it. The
Yeah.
traumas, the psychological issues, the confusion, the things that life has are stored in the identity. So when you dissolve that, you basically reach a state of not having suffering. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It,
And it's like very deceptive because there is power in these things.
mm-hmm.
All these, new age, witchcraft, whatever you want to call the so many different things that you
Yeah,
just
there's
mentioned.
so many. Yeah.
And, even like tarot cards, or like I've seen that thing recently, like the bowl therapy or whatever, have you seen
Sound
that?
healing.
I think so.
Yeah,
You know,
that's common in the new way. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's bad in and of itself
yeah, I don't know
because it's
anything
just
about, I just recently
sound.
seen some videos. I'm like, I'm not really sure what that is, but there's so
Yeah.
many different
It's to
things
reach a
out
state
there.
of peace. That's what people are seeking.
Exactly. They're seeking that peace, they're seeking healing, right? And a lot of these things, there is power in it because, like, Satan will give with one hand but take with the other, and there's power in it. There is stuff, but there's still this exchange, and it's dangerous territory. And you can speak more on that than me, like, I remember you said you traveled to China, and you, like, what were some of the places that you traveled to and these experiences that you went
Yeah, I was
and
about to learn Qigong, which is the ancient Taoist Chinese philosophy, basically energy cultivation. Qigong is energy work. So you're cultivating the energy of the body, your body, and being in connection with the universe and the cosmos and the energies of the universe, and healing organs, healing psychological issues through different meditations of cycling your energy, the microcosmic orbit and stuff. So I was all signed up, ready to go. The dude gets injured, the Qigong master, and
yeah,
has to cancel the program. So I still have my ticket. So I make a trip out of it and visit the town and the place I was going to go. I meet his wife and everything. And I was so deep into Qigong already in my time in Boulder and in college studying it. And I was really hoping that this would be like the 2-3 month, like where it would click.
yeah,
So then I decided to go to Thailand, where I did Muay Thai, started getting into martial arts, combat, kind of striking and such. I was doing jujitsu prior, but also yoga.
yeah,
And this beautiful cliff front property with these huts on the cliff, this yoga studio looking out at the ocean in Thailand, like gorgeous. And they had sound healing, kind of like sound bathing, I think it was, and all these different kind of modalities to reach a deep state of consciousness,
uh-huh.
because that's what it's about. Yoga postures are actually done by the yogi to get your body ready to enter into meditation.
Okay,
And then when you enter into meditation is when you try and reach moksha, enlightenment in a sense, in a
okay,
very simplistic form. But you also are breaking karmic attachments, things that are attached to you through lifetimes, through a state of getting into a state of deep consciousness. So the sound healing is to get you into a state of absolute stillness and peace.
okay.
That's kind of the goal. Stillness and peace. Stress is the enemy.
So is that sound healing like a step of yoga essentially, or just
No,
of the
it's not.
process essentially? It's different than
It's
yoga.
kind of a little addition to add
Okay.
in because, if I don't know if you've ever been to like a spa where they do like massage treatments and these types of things, but they have baths for the acupressure on the feet. They have sauna, they have steam, they have cold plunge, they have all these different things to kind of, that can be healthy, that can
Yeah.
be relaxing, that can soothe you. The same thing kind of because yoga is very much in the holistic health type realm.
Right. Yeah.
It's great for stretching, limber, keeping fit, all those things. Not everybody goes the way I went, which is studying Hinduism, studying the actual, yogic path
Yeah.
and all of what that entails. And in the teacher training that I did, because I ended up getting a certified yoga instructor,
Yeah.
very actually quickly after I actually came to Christ.
Yeah.
So I was studying yoga on my own. And then right when I graduated college, I did the training program because I was going to go I was going to go travel South America and teach yoga at different little retreat centers. Basically, that was my plan.
Yeah.
And so I got my yoga certification. In that, I specifically chose a studio that wasn't like fitness yoga, but was like, you're studying the Bhagavad Gita. You're studying the Vedic scriptures. Like
What are those?
those are the 1,000-year-old scriptures of Hinduism,
Okay.
where yoga originated. the philosophy of it.
Interesting.
And so I was also very into kind of the Indian medicine as well and such. But so the semantics around the word yoga has a very wide range. Some people, when they think of yoga, they think of like some stretching exercise like Pilates that came out of India.
Yeah.
And, it's different stretches to get you fit, to get you limber. They don't know much about it. Others, when they say yoga, this is their life dedication to breaking free from the karmic cycle of life and death and breaking out of reincarnation and becoming enlightened, becoming aware that, in a sense, they are the divine, they are God, the identity is an illusion, and becoming enlightened. It's a spiritual path. It's a religion.
Yeah.
And so it's very like yoga doesn't mean the same thing for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's why it's kind of interesting to see. I think some people gonna go overboard thinking that, bending down, touching your toes is somehow worshiping a Hindu deity every time.
Right.
But then there are specific sequences done in specific forms that deities revealed that is getting closer to worshiping an actual deity, that this kind of form, this sequence, everything about it originated from.
Interesting.
So it's obviously a very blurred line, but yoga is a deeply spiritual practice
Yeah.
in itself. But so I got that, and I was really just seeking healing. What is the best form of healing? Thinking that church and all this stuff, cathedrals and things that I've been exposed to, and just like it's felt so foreign until actually where my encounters, spiritual encounters, no longer come from potentially, spirit guides. It's a
Yeah.
big thing in kind of the occult or the new age, spirit guides guiding your kind of life trajectory, that there are beings that are spiritual. So there's like one step. I think there's a lot of positive things about some people becoming more spiritual, and usually they get into the new age deceptions, but
Okay.
it's people breaking free out of atheism. I think a big reason why New Age is so big is because atheism clearly doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah.
So they're looking around, and now that we live in a globalized world, all the religions have kind of blended into these new forms that never existed.
Right.
Prior, it was like you go to America and like 90% of people are Christian.
Yeah.
You go to Europe and even in the Middle Ages, everybody's Catholic.
Yeah.
Everybody's Christian.
Go to Asia, Buddhism.
Everybody's Buddhist.
Muslim.
Southeast, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
region
how it was
specific,
back in the day.
essentially.
It still is to an extent, but
Yeah.
now it's a hodgepodge.
Interweb, or the interweb, the internet,
Yep, internet.
TikTok, all the
Immigration, even the US
Yeah.
is a melting pot of different cultures and spirituality. So I think all that has led to this this kind of availability of spirituality, of religious ideas, of religious thought that never existed before.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a sense of novelty, which is appealing to somebody who is, in an evolutionary perspective, feeling like they're on the frontier as science is coming to a greater understanding of life, that obviously the old religions aren't going to be 100% correct. Now, the old religions and the way they practiced weren't necessarily 100% correct, because in church history, people getting burned at the stake, and there were dark periods of church. Not everything was 100% perfect to every religion. There were always mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't change the fact of Jesus Christ and who Jesus Christ is, obviously. But I think the availability of all these spiritualities is a very easy and attractive kind of off-ramp to, is the world just a materialistic, everything that exists is just the physical, observable through science, and that we are just nothing after we die? Is that, and every thought that we have and who we are is just a product of our brain and a sequence of motions and physics and neurochemistry, and there's actually no free will, and we're just kind of like robots that
Right.
somehow evolved to this? Like, doesn't make sense. That idea doesn't make sense. So naturally, I think people go towards available spirituality, which is nowadays a new age, and they go into different forms of it.
Yeah.
But traditional religion or Christianity is not seen as like an option, it seems like. Now,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who I met who were kind of also seeking in psychedelics and seeking in these different um, modalities of healing and spiritual, having on spiritual quests. They came from Christian upbringings.
Yeah.
And a lot of those were hypocritical, similar to how you mentioned.
Yeah.
Very hypocritical, very judgmental, very cold. And I think a lot of that comes from various sects of biblical interpretation or Christianity, that or just people weren't living out the faith. You know, they weren't actually following Christ.
Yeah.
Just because you say you believe in Jesus intellectually doesn't mean you're believing and having your faith and trusting in Jesus and actually following Jesus.
Even the demons believe.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and for me, that's what's so crazy, because when I came to Christ, it was very much the intellectual belief that Jesus is God changed everything for me.
Yeah.
Changed everything for me. Like, that was what I was like, no, 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 I don't believe that. The moment I believed it, everything changed. I started bawling. I started my sin. I felt convicted. I desired holiness. I desired him. Like, he is God. He is everything. He's everything I've been searching for. It changed everything for me.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was radical life change, radical repentance, radical. I had found the truth.
Yeah.
And now it's finding the fullness within Christ, the truth.
Because you'd experienced all these other powers and all these other things that people seek after, looking for healing and so on.
Yeah,
And now you found the real deal.
exactly. And the intellectual decision or the intellectual belief resulted in all that. But not everybody who intellectually believes or professes that Jesus is Lord, like he says, like, you know, Lord, Lord, haven't we cast out demons and done all these things in your name? And he's like, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you.
Yeah.
You workers of iniquity.
Yeah.
Because faith without works is dead.
Yes.
It's not actually real faith.
Yeah.
And it's actual real faith automatically results in displaying works. That's the Jesus's first words is repent and believe.
Yeah.
You know, it's about actually seeking to be like Jesus, made into the image of Christ, holiness, love, compassion, everything that he embodied. And I think an area where people go wrong in understanding, I guess, the gospel and Christ, and which results in a lot of people going to these alternative spiritualities from upbringings and experiences I mentioned, is they're not actually following Christ.
Right.
And when you read about Buddha and about compassion as the ultimate virtue and these beautiful things, you know, like, they're not satanic people killing babies. Now, the Mayans, they, you know, had human sacrifice and all these things. Like, some religions did do that. And even in the biblical times around Israel, we're sacrificing babies and to demon gods and all this.
Moloch and
Yep.
Yep.
But reading about Buddhism, it's like, this is beautiful. Withdrawing, seeking compassion for all living things, meditating for every living thing. You're gonna say something?
Or no, yeah, like the idea of it. Kind
The
of
idea,
like,
yeah.
kind of like a lot of people in New Age and, you know, stuff will be like, oh, I believe in Jesus, you know, like I'm a Christian, you know, it's like, well, okay, not being like quick to judge here. However, like there's not like this whole white witch. I'm a white witch. I'm in white magic or whatever, you know, like deceived is deceived.
Yeah,
know?
there's certain truths about what Christ said
Yeah.
that to follow him would entail believing them. And I think in regards to actually following Christ, because, you know, as I mentioned, Buddha sounds incredible, compassion, love for all things. And although that is good, it's not the fullness of ultimate good.
Yeah.
It has good, but it doesn't have all, which is in Christ.
Yeah.
Ultimate love, ultimate sacrifice. And those who actually follow Christ, who believe in Christ, who have faith in Christ, because faith automatically, to be alive, entails works. Jesus said, if you love me, obey my commands.
Yeah.
To love God is to obey his commandments.
Yes.
That is actually loving God, following Christ.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get turned off or think that it's some dead religion because they look at these Himalayan monks who seemingly exude such compassion and for the world, which they are seeking a noble pursuit, but they're not finding the fullness of truth who is in Christ.
Yeah.
And Christ is the fullness of compassion. Christ is the fullness of love. Christ is the fullness of righteousness. And all other religions that try to preach righteousness, there can be degrees of truth. And even, an early church father, Justin Martyr, he talked about the logos spermatikos, because like the logos is the word was God, the word was with God. So Jesus is the word, pre-existent. And he believed that the logos spermatikos was like the seed of the word
Yeah.
that was throughout time that human beings had a degree of access to. And I think he claimed that Plato, Socrates knew the logos, and the logos spermatikos was spread. But if Christ is the truth, if God is love, all human beings seeking for the truth, seeking for love, are in some degree interacting with God, but get deceived by a false God, or get deceived and they don't have the fullness of truth as presented through God's word and his relationship with mankind and his plan of salvation. So I think not discounting that is important, because if you think about a Satanist or somebody who's doing wickedness, who is murdering people or believes in human sacrifice, like that's actual evil.
Yeah.
Going to a mountaintop and trying to reach enlightenment might not necessarily be evil. It's just misguided.
Yep.
In its fullness of truth. Now, from a perspective on, okay, if you're being misguided a little bit from Christ, by definition, the word demon actually comes from the Greek daemon. Now, in Greek culture, daemon was just spiritual entity.
Mm-hmm.
It never took on a negative form until the translation of the Septuagint, which is the Hebrew scriptures, into Greek. And the Jewish people, they used the word daemon for the false gods.
Okay.
The idols that...
Even angels?
Not angels that served Yahweh.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But any spiritual entity in opposition to Yahweh was a daemon.
Okay, right.
Makes sense. So that's when demon took on the form of a malicious entity, because it was in contrary, it was in combative towards Yahweh, the one true God. So for doctrines of demons, by definition, if something's demonic, because I think people take the word demonic as like, whoa, the Exorcist movie, like that's crazy. So to call like another belief system or a way being demonic is like super heavy.
Yeah.
But from a biblical perspective, or even from a historical perspective, from a Jewish lens, demonic merely means from a source, a spiritual source, not of Yahweh, not of God. Now, there were angels who delivered messages to Daniel, and there were spiritual beings that delivered messages and even ideas and prophecies and such. But then there are also, beings that exist that will sow just a tiny bit of falsehood to veer someone away from reaching a genuine awareness and relationship with God. And to deceive a smart person, you can't just sow 100% lies.
Yeah.
You have to give goodness. You have to give truth.
Good point.
And that truth is real. That truth is real. That moral virtue that is being preached in various belief systems is real. But then it reaches a point where it has to be inserted to deviate away from Yahweh, Christ, God, to be effective.
And during that kind of switch, there's kind of the give and take of like, there is benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, this is working. I am getting some results. I'm sleeping better or whatever,
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of like intrigue.
Because that needs to be there, else why would anybody do it?
Right. And
it's all about, okay, short term is one thing, but long term is the most important.
Mm-hmm.
Even in habits we build in life, it's delayed gratification. And some things, it's just the nature of wickedness, the nature of evil, the nature of deception always involves bait. And that bait is usually real in a sense, and it's you're going after it, but it's not actually, it never gets fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
It never actually reaches the ultimate source where it's no longer bait, but it's actually the food source, or that you're actually arriving upon and actually eating. It's being You're being guided. And I don't know,
Mm.
I feel like, yeah, that concept that there is truth, there is benefit, but long term, and even, if you're to study, the Bible in depth, a lot of the stuff gets clarified. A lot of the misconceptions that I believed about Christ historically and from scholarly perspective don't add up.
Hmm.
That he was some enlightened master.
Oh yeah.
That actually doesn't add up from the historical evidence
Hmm.
because he claimed he was God. He claimed he was God. And the people closest to him claimed he was the pre existent Christ, the pre existent God, came in the form of man, who died for the sins of humanity, who had a specific plan of salvation for mankind, and is not just a human being of great spiritual power.
Hmm.
He never claimed that. He never preached that. He claimed, I am God. And the Jews tried to stone him for that because they believed he was blaspheming. So if he claimed he was God, then that means that either he's crazy, like, a lot of people believe that they're God and they're receiving help in psych wards,
Right.
and even people seeking in various Eastern traditions, they also have an idea underlying that they are God, but they forgot it. They are an extension of God, the source, and to actually reach enlightenment is to reach that divine awareness. Um, but so that's kind of why they think when Jesus says, I am God, they're thinking he's saying that. But clearly he's not because he was born of a virgin. You and I are not born of a virgin. We don't have a supernatural birth. So if you're to claim that, oh, Jesus was an enlightened master, he claims he was God, that really means that Hinduism or these Eastern spiritualities are correct, that we are all God. That's what he was actually saying. That's actually very, very common. And, but it doesn't make sense because he had a supernatural birth and that was prophesied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years prior. And
Right.
we have the actual evidence of the Dead Sea Scrolls showing that that prophecy was given historically around, I think, 700 years prior. Book of Isaiah, scroll of Isaiah, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. It wasn't
Mhm.
just inserted there after
Right.
to confirm the legend of the Gospels and the apostles
Yeah. Or like after it happened, it was
after it happened.
way.
It wasn't fabricated.
Yeah.
So all this study clarifies a lot. And then it really comes down to the direct encounter
Yeah.
with God, with Christ. And then, for me, it just clicked that this is the fullness of love. This is the fullness of righteousness, of
Mhm.
truth. This is, and I think that's something that you can't necessarily convince someone of intellectually. That is something that must be experienced, and you get into the realm of faith and all that. But that's a very important direct encounter.
Mm.
And, the power and seeing the power of God on display is a
Yeah.
very important element of that. Miracles that just shatter your materialistic perspective. Whoa, God can intervene in the world that he created.
Yes.
Super important.
That was the probably biggest thing for me was seeing the power of God. Like
Mm-hmm.
people getting healed and deliverance and stuff. And I'm just like, okay, I've read about this my whole life, but why haven't I seen it? You know? And then it wasn't until, Hungry Gen or like right before that I started seeing these things. And I'm like, okay, like I've always believed God was real, but now it's at another level.
Mm-hmm. To see consistent medically verified miracles, and obviously just because something is medically verified, there can be some potential or probability that in that moment, they did go into remission. Their cancer did go into remission, just as anybody who might not even believe in Christ, their cancer would go into remission and would leave and such like that. Like there can be instances of that, but so many in the direct moment of prayer and the direct sensation of heat coming on them and the direct, and then immediate medically verifiable miracles. We almost take it for granted, I think,
Yeah. You just
at
get,
least in the years that I've been exposed to it.
mm-hmm.
I was like, in the beginning. And now it's just like, wow, it's incredible. But it's not like that, like, whoa,
Yeah,
you
kind of
know?
like, at Raise to Deliver, different conferences, people, come in wheelchairs, just walk out, leave them, be like, I don't need that. Um, or like, I remember at one conference, there was this lady came in with I think it was the one in Vancouver. Um, she brought in this massive breathing machine, all these wire like hoses hooked up to her face, and she couldn't breathe without it. And got set from spirit of infirmity,
Mm.
and then completely healed, and just rips everything out.
Wow.
And she also couldn't even like barely walk. And now she's like running around, breathing hard, like breathing normal, and just leaves the thing there. And we see it so much. I'm kind of like, can someone move this? Because it's kind of in the
Yeah.
way of like the prayer line. And
And that's a literal biblical example of Jesus casting out a spirit of infirmity of the woman
Yeah.
who was bound.
right.
Literally was bound, hunchback, full on debilitating condition, spirit of infirmity cast out.
Yep.
It was in like the spiritual aspect of healing
Yeah.
and how God and Christ is the literal answer or the
Mhm.
source of so many incredible miracles that people, shamans that I would seek out doing ayahuasca rituals
Mhm.
and shamans who are doing even changa, which is smokable kind of form
Hmm.
of DMT with various
Yeah.
herbs, MAOI inhibitors and such,
Yeah.
that I did, and different rituals to do to cleanse one of these kind of spiritual things,
Right.
which affects the physical body. All that's very much understood outside of Christianity. But the fruit of it is so apparent to me inside of Christ
Yeah.
and Christ being the source of it. It's just so apparent. And all throughout history and even in the Bible, because reading that for the first time from kind of how I kind of grew up in terms of my perspective and how even my network of people I grew up with thought. I think even culture as a whole is that miracles are just not real or could be, but don't really know how, but don't want to look into it. Or
Or again, back to the fables and myths and
fables and
stories.
myths, hyperbole,
Yep.
exaggeration.
You're like, oh, it's a story,
Yeah, Bronze Age thinking about a certain thing that was actually scientifically explainable.
Yeah.
But multiplying bread is not some kind of scientifically explainable thing.
Yeah.
He didn't have an oven. He didn't get wheat shipped in and then start cooking out oven, and then the disciples brought it and transported
Uber
it.
Eats.
It literally happened in an instant.
Yeah.
And these are miracles that Jesus Christ performed.
Mm-hmm.
And logically speaking, makes complete sense that the one who created all the natural laws can come in, temporarily adjust, insert things, remove things within the creation that God created.
Yeah.
Fine tuning, editing, and putting things completely back into synergistic harmony. All the natural laws. Like it makes complete logical sense. If he created it, he's above it and he can edit it. You know what I mean? Miracles and such. And but I think it's just very unfortunate that people are getting guided into these other modalities, especially vets, especially people who need it the most.
Yeah.
And who are getting guided that direction when, man, it's all in Christ.
So you've been down that road of the new age and all these different things. I think, and I've seen a lot of my personal friends are, they're out now and, they're doing some of these things you're mentioning. The biggest one I see is alcohol though.
Mm.
And kind of a big open door, right? That is a leading factor to a lot of these other things, but really just a, segue to depression, anxiety, isolation, and suicide.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, a lot of them, it's like, I've literally had people say, like, don't go out and drink alone in your home,
Mm.
and
That's the worst thing you can do.
yeah, like, because they don't want you to be a libo risk or, which is like go out and do something stupid in your off time. Right. And so, and also this culture of not talking about your problems, like right now, this is so healthy. This is so healing. Imagine if more people were just having these conversations, and just getting things out in the open and having community. But alcohol, man, just you know, the culture of being absent and isolating and drinking your sorrows away is such a
Mm,
killer.
that is so, yeah, sad. Alcohol is so damaging. And I remember even in my kind of spiritual quest before Christ, alcohol, even in kind of the healing community, is very much seen as that's why there's a negative, that's why there's a very big movement, even towards non religious people, of not drinking, young
Interesting.
people,
Interesting.
because these effects are so damaging. Clearly, this is not healing,
Yeah.
and even in college and when I quit, it had nothing to do with the Bible says be sober. Didn't even know what the Bible said. I'd never even read the Bible. It was very much like all the conversations, all the people I meet, a lot of it's fake, doesn't last. You don't remember it. It's not genuine. It's toxic for the body, getting drunk, liver, alcoholism, how many lives it destroys. Empirically, this is a negative substance and is very easily abused.
Yeah.
And so that kind of fueled my spiritual new age pursuits of modalities. And because when I quit, it was very hard. It was very hard to go to a party, to go out, to go to bars and all the things that most university, students do.
Yeah.
Became very different because I'm just in a different headspace.
Mhm.
But then the conversations I would have, so much more meaningful.
Yeah.
The people I would meet, the connections I would form, so much deeper, so
Yeah.
much more real.
Than just getting together and forgetting everything.
Exactly.
Escape.
Yeah. Or having some great combo, but like the next day not having a connection with that individual.
Right.
And
Because the wall's not dropped.
yeah. And really it's, like people say, it's a liquid confidence.
Yeah.
So why am I going to use this crutch? I might as well get over this now
100%. Face
instead
it.
of face it, dude. Face it.
Yep.
And for the first like 6 months, face it every single time. Anytime I went out, awkward, weird. Then it started getting normal. Then
Yeah.
more people are like, whoa, really? Whoa, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I wish I could. And like a lot of people naturally desire that. And then being in a community where none of that's even a thought of, yet people have an incredible time, social
Yeah.
events, social gatherings.
Remember it.
Yeah,
Imagine
remember
that.
it. Incredible events, all this stuff, like with no mention of it.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it's so unnecessary, but it does fulfill a temporary benefit of forgetting your sorrows.
Right. And, there's all these other angles that people, will say like, okay, what about Jesus and why and this and that? Like, I don't think we really need to get into that. Mike Signorelli has a great teaching on that. I think Pastor Vlad does as well. But, there's different things that they say like in the Bible medically and whatever. But me, like just practically speaking for myself, I've been, a little over 3 years now, I think, without a sip. And, you know, my health is way better. My finances are way better, you know, but also just the ability to not escape, is and just confront things. It's all of this for me is like facing it and giving it to the Lord.
Yeah.
The
I
practical.
think, yeah, the alcohol is a means of not facing it,
Exactly.
abusing it.
Yeah.
When you intentionally go to it, it's to intentionally not face.
Yeah. And it's also not just alcohol. It's essentially an example of what could be anything.
It could be sugar.
Yeah.
It could be food.
For a lot. Yeah.
It could be video games,
Yeah.
porn.
Yeah.
It could be all sorts of
It
addictions.
could even be
things.
working out. It could be,
Yeah.
it could be
something positive.
good things. Yeah.
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 Not facing the actual internal.
Yeah. I guess
issues.
it really all comes back to, facing like, what does God want to do in me? And am I willing to walk that road, whatever it takes?
Mm-hmm.
And, have that consecration, go the road of sanctification, right? What does that look like? And for me, this is the big thing for me with alcohol is it was a shift in my life of like, what can I do and get away with and still be a Christian, to what can I give up in order to be closer to God?
Mm.
And so it was this, for me, my life, I'm like all out or I'm all in. And so it was like, At the time, I was just having maybe a beer with dinner with a buddy, you know, or something like that. Occasionally, I wasn't out getting hammered like
Mm,
that. But if I had that door cracked, man,
mm,
you know, and it would open the door to other things, you know, like when I was struggling with pornography, I'd drink a beer, it drops my guard.
mm.
That was the biggest thing for me is like, I can't have my guard dropped. If I'm going to do this thing, like I can't have any open doors. I can't crack it. I can't drop my guard. I need to be like, we are in a war,
Be
you know.
sober. The devil walks around as a roaring lion.
In Peter, read it yesterday.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm in First Second Peter right now. Yeah, 100% being sober minded, be alert, being
Alert,
vigilant,
vigilant. Yeah.
diligent also.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And it's like, you know, and being someone that was in actual warfare, like physical shooting bullets, like you got to be vigilant. You got to be trained up. You got to be diligent, you know? And if we're in, people want to throw around the term spiritual warfare, like, okay, let's think about what actual warfare is like. You know, it's life and death. You know, this is real, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about all this deception. You know, the enemy is Satan's trying to take us out, take out our families, you know, like, you know,
Yeah,
like
there's
we
real
can't,
evil in the world, evil forces in the world.
and our decisions impact that influence and what they're capable, what access are we giving, you know? And for
Yeah.
me, alcohol was access,
Mm,
no matter how small.
yeah. Yeah. That's a big one. Did you ever smoke weed?
Never,
Wow. Never.
never done the
You've
weed.
never smoked weed.
Nope.
Wow. Did people in military do that?
Not if you want to stay in.
Oh, okay. So it was just banned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because they
no.
do
And
drug tests and everything. Weed's a common THC.
the military, it is caffeine and nicotine.
So it wasn't like Vietnam, heroin, and a bunch of drugs being taken by.
I mean, there's guys getting busted with drugs,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
every now and again, but
It's not a culture at all.
yeah, I mean, for the most part, in the Marine Corps, it is caffeine, nicotine. Always having monsters and
Mm.
dip cans. I mean, dip and monster.
Alcohol?
Well, yeah, during the off time,
Okay.
yeah, culture, Marine Corps drinking culture. I mean, it's a gun club and a drinking club, you
Mm.
know. And I didn't even start drinking until I got to the sniper community because I was so stressed out from being a pig, and like my buddies would be drinking, and you know. So I went most of my life, you know, without even drinking,
Mm.
and then it just became culture. You know, started the sniper community very early in my career, and then
Did you have a disposition towards it when you started? Because
yeah, I was really against it.
your father, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was very against alcohol. I never had made like an oath or anything to myself of I will never, you know, nothing like that. It was just like, nah, you know.
I thought one of the coolest things that started it for me was so early on in the presidential election of 2016, the Republican National Committee had their Republican debate at Boulder,
Hmm.
Colorado, at the University of Colorado Boulder, where I went to school.
Okay.
So I was like 200 yards from the basketball arena where they're having the debate in my dorm room. And I was like, all politicians are corrupt. All, you know, that was kind of my perspective. So I tune in, and then I start hearing Trump go off unscripted, not kind of this kind of like, you know, facade of just, you know, like the classic politician. I'm like, whoa.
Just ripping on everyone.
And then I find out this guy's never drinking a sip of alcohol in his life.
That's right.
And I was like, whoa. And then this guy,
The
like,
purity.
I'm like, wow. And the amount of like events, you know, success, you know, everything that he's experienced and done and accomplished. And it's like, not a sip.
Yeah.
And then I read one of his books, and he was talking about how he was like, man, that was the best advantage I had getting to Manhattan, because all these top real estate guys that he was meeting were like basically getting drunk when he would go out with them at the bar. And he's like, dude, I'm going to crush it if everyone's like this.
Yeah, you're my competition.
Yeah. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow. And he's obviously so confident in himself and just so
Yeah.
assertive and the presence he carries and such. And it's just like, wow, this guy doesn't need alcohol
Yeah.
as a liquid confidence.
Right.
I think that was kind of one thing that just kind of like shocked me and
Mm.
made me realize this is not necessary.
Yeah.
In a social context, you do not need to get drunk.
Yeah. And I mean, also, like, let's be real, like, you know, if people have coping mechanisms of any kind, to escape from traumatic events or memories, and trauma can be different for everyone, right? It can be, someone maybe they were sexually abused, or, maybe like a divorce, or maybe, it
Yeah.
could be combat, or it could be all kinds of different things, like moving for some people, like
Mm-hmm.
different things to, affect different people. But just like, different trauma affects different people have different coping mechanisms. Nicotine could be one of vice, or caffeine,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to just be alcohol or weed or
Sugar.
sugar, right? And so it's like, the kicker is, just facing it. And there's gonna, when you take something like that away, it's like fasting. There's this resistance, it is a fight, it is difficult. But once you face it enough and you allow, this time and the Lord to bring this healing, eventually there's this breakthrough of, kind of like right now, I don't crave alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, zero
Yeah.
part of me, same like with looking at pornography. Like I crave purity. I
Yeah.
want, when I get married, in the future, I don't want the terrible marriage I had. I want to be alert and be able to choose wisely. Before, I was waving through all the red flags, but I had
Mm.
so many coping mechanisms. I had so much garbage in my life. I was so unhealthy, not ready for anyone, even a good person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, just being able to go through that season and be a healthy person,
Yeah. That's so huge.
have the fruits of the spirit in your life, be a kind person, be like a good dude, right? Like, even on the basic, not even just all these spiritual things, but being a good person,
Yep.
even,
Exactly.
and just being able to be there for somebody else. Cause if I'm drunk, if I'm escaping all the time, I can't be there for a wife.
No.
I can't be there for kids.
Yep.
So as men specifically, we have to even be more so intentional with this because we have people to lead.
And it weakens you.
Yeah.
All those addictions. That was actually a huge thing in my journey, because I think a lot of the reason I got into the various spiritualities is because I was getting benefit.
Yeah.
Like, I was wanting to be a better person. I was
Yeah.
wanting to be a stronger person, to stand up for righteousness, justice, to be a positive force in the world. I remember in high school, I think I did like a speech on MLK, and like writing it, I was like, it was so deep. It was weird for the class. It was like so deep because I was high almost most days. And when you get high, you think that you're so novel, and these ideas that you have are so deep and enlightened. And it definitely took me more philosophical. I became much more deep thinking person. But I remember I was just like so touched at like the life of MLK, and like against racism and justice and love all people and all these things. I was like reading the biographies of Gandhi and these greats of who did, great works of justice and such. And I was seeking to be a better person. And these addictions were seen as, this is hindering me.
Mm.
This is making me a less effective force
Yeah.
at this goal than I desire.
Yeah.
So this cannot be in my life.
Yeah.
And I made a concerted effort, quit smoking weed,
Yeah.
quit watching porn, because
Yeah.
it reduces your masculinity, reduces your actual strength. It reduces your understanding of genuine true love.
Oh, complete
Way
intimacy disorder.
Intimacy disorder, dude.
Yeah.
Way before I even knew about the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
It was apparent to me that porn and masturbation was destructive.
Yeah.
My friends thought I was crazy, dude. I would get laughed at so many times. Like, it was just, but it was so apparent to me. I tried to, obviously, I was like, you guys know what you're talking about. You gotta try it. You gotta, you gotta go down that route because it's so much better. But it gets so normalized. But when you actually have a pursuit, and I think a way to break addiction is to have this vision, to have this idea of wanting this good and hope to know that it's possible.
So good.
it fuels you.
So good, because you can't just stop, right? You need to replace it. And what do we replace it with? The love of the Father, and allowing the love of the Father to bring healing. And because it's easy to just be like, just stop, try harder, do
But
better.
why stop? You
Exactly.
have to understand why.
Why and how. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like, how do I, you know, like and it's usually not because the desire's not there. A lot of people that they want to stop
Yeah.
pornography or drinking or whatever it might be, they have the desire, they know it's destructive. It's an addiction,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but they don't have the tools.
Yeah. You have to desire increase in, I guess, good in your life, in a sense. You have to have a vision of which hope is required in this. And I think that's why God is the ultimate source of being able to do this. But to actually battle addictions, there has to be hope of a better future
Yeah.
and a desire to be a better person,
Yeah.
to be a bigger force in the world, because these core motivating factors, I think, provide a strength that most modalities don't provide.
Yeah.
And to have that fuel behind you also allows you to find out, okay, what are the things in my life preventing me from doing this? If I live once, or even if you believe in reincarnation, because if you keep reincarnating, you still have to address the problems you didn't address in the previous lifetime. So there's an endless cycle of you must face it.
Yeah.
Even in the reincarnation perspective, like my perspective was, even on like suicide, to think of suicide that isn't compatible in reincarnation, because if you kill yourself now, you're going to have to face all the exact same problems that you're facing in this exact moment in the next lifetime. There's
Yeah.
no escape. You must process it, the
Yeah.
karma and such. But even understanding that you have one lifetime, what are you going to do with it? Give it everything you got.
Yeah.
Follow God.
Mm-hmm.
What is your calling? Give it everything you got. Building that then immediately starts addressing the addictions, things that are limiting, preventing, weakening that from occurring.
Yeah.
Even gets into the health realm, which is a whole nother topic we could go on,
Right.
because we go hard on that.
And that's the process of sanctification. And also, all these things we've talked about already, new age, coping mechanisms, addictions, all these different things. It's like, okay, people are so quick to try all these different things, but it's like, okay, well, try this. Have you tried Jesus? Like,
Yeah.
okay, you tried everything else. Try the Pepsi challenge, try it for 30 days. If it doesn't work for you. Okay. But give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
If you're willing to try everything else out, if you want to live a life of sacrifice instead of self-fulfillment and pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to serve people other than yourself, if a life of service appeals to you, I challenge you,
Yeah.
Try giving up your life, try losing your
Yeah.
life
Embody Christ.
like Jesus did. A boss.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolute legend with a capital L, the legend.
Legend.
Like the legend, the
Yeah.
greatest to ever live, the full embodiment of how we're meant to be. And I think when you think about Christ, I think it's pertinent for people who feel like they don't have a purpose in life or a meaning, or what does my life have meaning? Because I went through a long time of despairing, confusion. What is my purpose of existence?
Mm,
Why do I exist? Who am I?
yeah.
The answers from an atheist perspective don't exist. So it leads to deep confusion. So I investigated psychology to explain, where do my thoughts come from? Who am I? Blah, blah. Got into Buddhism, illusion, the ego. That was my journey. But everybody faces the ultimate question of, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is my meaning? And I think if people are wondering about their identity and if they have any value, just think about what Christ did.
Yeah.
God, who created the heavens and the earth, who created humanity, all was good. Humanity decided to disconnect from God, decided to disconnect into sin. this sin nature is then inherited genetically, spiritually through all human beings who then decide to sin and are culpable for their sin. This goes on. God comes into the form of a human being in an actual womb. He could have just like teleported into the earth and done a bunch of stuff and then teleported out and taught the world incredible doctrine, incredible teachings, and to heal people. He came in the form of a human being through Mary, was born, lived a life just as we live, and contained in him is the fullness of God. He doesn't go and become some king and live in an incredible palace. He literally, the own evil of human beings, pushes him to the point of death.
Mm-hmm.
The very sin which he came to provide a way of freedom from crucifies him. And literally on the cross, all he's thinking about is the reason I came here is so that my created beings, you that I love, can be reconciled back to me,
Yeah.
can be connected back to me. And he endured all that because there's heresy in the early church, the heresy that, oh, he didn't really experience the suffering as we would because he was God.
Right.
Like he's God. Like that suffering doesn't mean anything to God.
He's also fully human.
He was fully human. He fully experienced that as if we were there.
And that one point alone, I want to point out, some people will, be like, oh, like kind of like the being too tough to be a Christian, like the perception of Christianity of like soft men or whatever. Be like, being a Christian is a life of sacrifice, like what you're just describing, Jesus on the cross. Literally, if you do the research of the weight of the cross and the distance he carried it.
Oh my gosh, dude.
That being
Under
healthy,
the wounds he was in.
yeah,
man.
even if you're healthy, been on a workout plan, got your good pre-workout, ready
Yeah.
to rock and roll, your first form gear on, you're ready to go. Like that's still hard,
Oh yeah.
Like that could be a CrossFit Games competition.
Yeah.
He did it with his flesh hanging off his bones, malnourished, beaten, bloodied, all this stuff for us. That thought, you can't get more masculine than that to me.
You can't be more of a legend.
Yeah.
Like, and to know that he who did that is here right now,
Yeah.
is literally here right now. And every human being on earth can know him and he
Mhm.
wants to know them and be
Yeah.
in a relationship. He's alive. He resurrected. He defeated death. He did all that, resurrected, spoke to the disciples, appeared to them.
Yeah.
500 eyewitnesses, seeing him after he was resurrected, empty
Right.
tomb. We don't have his body.
Yeah.
Ascends into heaven publicly. All this gets eyewitness account historical record, ends up becoming the biggest religion on planet Earth. And the apostles, to even think about them, because they weren't God, but they knew God as he was on earth in the flesh, they went to insane lengths to tell people this is real, what we saw. They gave up their livelihoods.
Mhm.
They gave up everything just to tell people this is legit. Jesus is real. And people back then still didn't believe. And it was literally 10 years fresh, 5 years fresh. In the flesh, God was right there and people didn't believe.
Yeah.
Now we're 2,000 years later, still exists. But back then, if the evidence could be right in front of you like that and people still didn't believe, it's just mind-boggling.
Man.
But the apostles, they went to gruesome deaths
Yeah.
for this cause, for this to reach more people.
Yeah. It wasn't just casual.
No, it wasn't casual at all. They were militant in getting it out there, yet they were so peaceful, nonviolent. They were getting crucified. They were getting burned at the stake. I remember reading about one, Ignatius of Antioch. He was like writing to the Romans and he said, "Don't deliver me from my martyrdom. Like, don't try and rescue me. They're taking me. I'm captive. They're going to take me to be killed.
Yeah.
Don't deliver me. I'm ready to go to Christ.
Yeah.
Like, how legendary. And they lived holy lives, like in a world that was way more dark than the world we live in even today. Way more dark, way more violent, way more brutal, way more killing, way more. It was a very brutal world back then. Way more, demonic worship,
Mm.
full blown, orgies of demon gods and, sacrificing children and all these things. Like, and they pushed against that culture, which was normalized
Mm-hmm.
to live holy lives for Christ. And we're extremely intelligent as well, but it's like, it's not some soft go soak in some rock band music worship thing.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's worship music that has that emotion.
Yeah.
There's other worship music that is intense.
Yeah.
And there's other worship music that is genuinely directed towards God, not just because I think there's a differentiation between some music being Christian music, being intense, being, uplifting, others being more kind of emotional, more kind of feel, which is actually needed for a lot of people, especially men who are so hard-hearted,
Yeah.
who haven't cried in 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
who need to just weep and let it all go and repent
Yeah.
and actually becoming a loving father or a loving person. And you know what I mean?
And that's part of our soul is emotion and feelings.
Mm-hmm. But then some go too far down that and they think Jesus was kind of floating around.
Yeah. Not some hippie with
Yeah.
sandals on, smoking weed and whatever.
But he was extremely assertive.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah.
extremely assertive.
Yeah.
And yeah, the strength too. But yeah, bro, it's in Christ. But transitioning, because I wanna talk about this with you because you're fully dialed into this and I love it. Health, bro.
Let's do it.
Like I've had a semi intense journey with it, and that period super intense. Like I went raw vegan for not that long, only over a month, but it was a big deal to not eat anything that was cooked and only raw stuff. I think it was over a month. Vegan for a year, experimenting, trying to be healthier because there's a massive attack on health. And RFK Jr. in his speech where he talked about I think where he endorsed Trump, where he kind of took his name off the ballots and any swing states and stuff. He had a big 20-minute segment on the chronic health epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, it's insane. It's insane. Like there is a massive surge in cancer, obesity, diabetes, autism, Alzheimer's, everything across the board, disease. Becoming aware of that kind of motivated me to get healthy. But I'm curious because I haven't even really asked you. I think it's probably around the performance based, because you're super elite performance tactical, but obviously there's probably more to that too. But how did you start it? Because you're very committed, even a lot of the crazy things experimenting that, we try
we
to
try different
implement,
things.
like you're fully about it. How did you get to that? Because you didn't grow up like that.
Right.
Almost nobody does.
Yeah. So for me, it started when I was a kid. Kind of funny because it was more so out of anger.
Huh.
Yeah. I started working out in 5th grade. My second 5th grade, actually, I took it once in Alaska and once in Washington. More so to just see what the difference was. There was a big difference. No, I got held back, when I moved here because in Alaska, I didn't learn much other than how to hunt, fish, and pick berries and gold pan. And so quick side note, I had 5 kids in my 5th grade class in Alaska.
Wow.
Including me. And,
where? What town?
Palmer in Matanuska Valley.
Huh.
And 2 of the other kids were twins. So besides me and 2 twins, we had 2 kids in our class.
Wow.
Yeah. Our gym had carpet. My teacher was an Eskimo. It was pretty cool.
Huh.
But anyways, the education wasn't too great for me. And I just didn't really care. And, but anyways, I was kind of an angry kid, aggressive kid, and working out became an outlet for me.
Okay. So it was working out that kind of started the health.
Yeah. I would do a lot of prison workouts in my room, listening to rock. And I wasn't supposed to listen to rock music, but I had a FM radio, dial into the rock station and work out. And, My brother gave me some dumbbells, and
But your diet was garbage.
oh yeah, my diet was. I mean, whatever I had as a fifth grade kid. I also started being a paper boy when I was in fifth grade. So I packed a ton of weight, got up at like 3 a.m. every day for like 5, 6 years, of, maybe that's why I'm as tall as I am, is because I didn't sleep and I just carried a bunch of weight.
Wow.
My joints were always hurting as a kid, barely slept. But yeah, so
But now you're like dialed in with dietary morning regime,
yeah,
quality.
that shift, I mean, even in high school, I did sports and stuff, but I mean, and I was really fast and strong and high level in sports. But like, I mean, I'm eating like mac and cheese and NO explode before a track meet, like
Yeah.
I can just imagine if I had someone telling me how to eat right.
Yeah.
And we both know now that that's the foundation of fitness.
Mm-hmm.
It's the base level of the pyramid that everything else is built off of.
Yep.
And so it really wasn't until MARSOC actually, or during snipers, like, through the military when I'd get classes on, in MARSOC, even at the beginning of selection, you get tons of nutritional classes, very high level. We had nutritionists, that we could go to, make meal plans, get a DEXO scan, like the weight of our bones, the weight of all these different things. And they'd be like, what are your goals? And then a personalized plan for you.
Mm.
And our,
You mentioned that. Yeah, that's crazy.
yeah, very personalized. And then our weights coach.
It's like you're an NFL athlete, but in a military context.
Yeah, well, actually, funny you say that because my personal trainer, his name was John Hastings. He was with I think the Chargers and
Oh,
the
wow.
Chiefs or something for like 20 some years as their primary
Whoa.
strength coach. And he came over to Second Raider Battalion as our dude. Like
Crazy.
all my workout plans for the whole 5 years I was at Second Raider Battalion, he was like running all of our workouts, all of our programs. He has an app now and all these things.
Wow.
So that was the level of fitness I had, but it was really there where I started getting like someone was telling me like, hey, that's wrong. Do this. This is what right
Mhm.
looks like. But
Yeah, that is a start because if you don't have that, it's what I am doing wrong.
yeah,
The only thing you know that's right is like eat your vegetables,
right.
eat your greens.
Yeah. Protein powder or whatever. Like,
Yeah, but it's like no reason like why, what that does, or what you're doing now and what that does. You don't know anything.
yeah.
And I think the first part for me was my mom started getting into it.
Okay.
Naturally, that knowledge started becoming, accessible.
Hmm.
So it was only a matter of time before I started trying her little veggie burritos. She tried to kind of like sneak it in, and I was like more open minded because I was like into weed and more open minded. So
Yeah.
um, I was literally like eat them while I was high, and like trying to change my diet, thinking that was like a positive element of weed. But it wasn't until college because I had health issues. I had like GI problems. I don't know. The doctors didn't know exactly what was happening.
Hmm.
It wasn't like Crohn's disease, but it was very similar to like leaky gut syndrome. And all I ate was pasta, pizza,
Hmm.
and ice cream, and just pure colorless foods. And I got to college sophomore year. I'm like, I'm changing everything. So I started making fire smoothie bowls
Hmm.
with berries and nuts and seeds, all these granola, all this stuff. And I would just eat them every day. And I'd make pesto pasta with broccoli. And those were the two meals that literally changed my life.
When in regards to your like gut.
In regards to my diet going like parabolic,
Oh,
getting
okay.
healthier. And then my gut stuff, yeah, went away.
Okay.
My gut stuff went away within a year and a half. Right when I started eating those two things, then I started getting into some supplementation. Then I started learning a lot about whole foods fasting. So I did a 7-day water fast while going to class. while doing. I skipped a few because it was sometimes it was just brutal. But had my journal, did a colon cleanse during that. People thought I was a lunatic,
Yeah.
and I had never known anybody who was doing fasting like that except online. What I was learning about online, stem cell production, organ regeneration, all these incredible things of fasting, HGH stimulation and production.
Right.
So I was like, I was cleansing my temple was my path, my goal of all the years of damage.
When was that time for you? Like, was that after you came to know Christ or
All
during
before
New Age?
New Age.
You're doing water.
It actually became a religion in a sense.
Yeah.
It was a spiritual path.
Okay.
When I started getting the basics down and I started philosophizing, if that's even a word, thinking philosophically about what optimal health does or will do, it was like, if we're being degraded and dumbed down and our consciousness is being lowered, we're meant to increase our vibration, increase our consciousness, which is done through a healthy lifestyle and through pursuit of virtues in the soul and building the soul. But the physical temple is important too for the soul to even express itself.
Yeah.
So if your physical temple's run down, you can't even go do stuff that your soul wants to do or desires to do because your physical body can't. So it has a limiting factor, kind of as we talked about with addictions.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, purify the temple, cleanse the temple, then you can conduct the highest energy and raise your consciousness.
Yeah.
And reach enlightenment more effectively in a sense because you're less murky. Energy can flow through you more fluidly, more conductivity for your biomagnetic field, your bioenergetic field, which does exist. The body does have that's the nervous system and how cells communicate and such. But I took it to the point where it's like enlightenment comes from being as healthy as possible.
Interesting.
And this was a huge thing when I came to Christ. Because obviously what comes with that is pride sneaks in.
Yeah. Yeah.
People eating at McDonald's aren't as smart as you.
Right.
Or are addicted to something. And it's like, it's a sneaky little thing. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
God's thing is the heart is all that matters. The
Yeah.
righteousness, the purity of heart is what lives on forever, not this physical body.
And really that can go in any way. Like, like we were talking about before, like sugar, or addictive stuff, like fast food, 100% dopamine from, a dopamine addiction, dopamine hit from a burger, like McDonald's or whatever, like, when it comes to fitness, McDonald's is what my grandpa says, like, when I said I started working out as a source of, it was a coping mechanism, right? It was escape from, like, I was an angry kid, grew up with just a lot of chaos and, but then, working out became a thing of performance in regards to, I'm very ultra competitive, sports. I wanted to be the best. Like, I was too aggressive for basketball. Like, I was like, I was like trying to tackle people during basketball, and they're like, dude, you need to play football. I'm like, I want to, or wrestle. But like, when you're preparing for like sniper school or special operations, you need to be in this whole nother level of fitness.
Oh yeah, dude.
And also with that is, this, so for me, it was a lot of performance.
Yeah.
Like I need to be able to perform these standards, like, but not just perform them, but crush them. And so, that's not a bad thing.
Not at all.
You
not at all, dude.
You have to be able to, now in law enforcement, I want, if someone gets, someone needs carried out, I'm your dude. If I need carried out, I hope you got me.
Yep.
Not everyone, I don't think everyone can do that.
Yep.
And that's a standard that people need to be thinking about.
Exactly.
Can we perform the tasks in our life, wherever we are, whatever our field is, and like for you, you want to be, you're about to go out of the country and study for a year, very high demand, cognitively for you, being able to take care of your brain, and like be very like on point.
Yeah.
And, that's something that you and I have also been diving into in cognition and brain health.
That's kind of where I'm at now with it.
Yeah.
Prior, it was about obviously getting rid of my condition and just getting healthier and fighting like the evil force that is destroying humanity through disease.
Hmm.
That's what I started kind of waking up to. So I mentioned kind of RFK and him bringing a lot of visibility to that. I think it's so important because the medical system with chronic disease, so bad.
Yeah.
But with acute trauma and surgical, trauma and all these things, incredible technologies, medical technologies, pharmaceuticals, chronic disease, corrupt, dude.
Yeah.
The food companies in bed with the, big pharma in bed with the PR marketing and all the big web of deception, the CDC, FDA,
Yeah.
serving on the board of Monsanto and then boom, right on the government positions and changing the laws to benefit. It's all corrupt. So that was actually a huge motivating factor
Hmm.
to fight that evil.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be unhealthy. I'm going to be healthy. There was always a good versus evil kind of element to my spiritual path. So becoming healthy was like fighting evil in a sense because you're fighting death, you're fighting disease.
So good.
And now it's like, as we've kind of been going hard at it, performance, cognition, being a higher capacity individual and
Yes.
living longer with better health in general.
Yeah. And that's totally a holy and righteous thing.
Yep.
That's aside from the pride we mentioned before, because right now we want to be used at the highest capacity possible. Like I said at the beginning, like I am violently pursuing Jesus. Whatever, anything that is worth doing is worth doing to the fullest.
Yep.
And so I want to be, and also like if someone runs away from me at work,
Yeah.
I'm gonna chase you, man.
Dude,
Like,
every cop needs to be at your level
you
of
know,
physical
like-
capacity.
like you ain't getting away. You're going to jail, you
Yeah.
know? And being able to take care of your family, be healthy so you can, provide for like play with your kids when you're older.
Yeah. Exactly. The longevity element, dude. And that's what I like about the Blueprint Protocol. Brian Johnson's he's a rejuvenation athlete. He kind of coined that term.
Right.
And now everybody's trying to reduce their speed of aging to be
Yeah.
like 0.6, 0.5. So every one chronological year, biologically, it's actually at about the 0.5, 0.6 years,
Yeah.
which is a cool concept that the average speed of aging is one way, but you can do all these things, pretty basic actually, cardio, workout, eat healthy, some supplementation,
Remove poison from your diet.
sleep well. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can live 10, 15, 20 years longer.
Yeah.
Why not start doing that now and build the habits?
100%. And your taste buds will adapt.
Yes, they go back to normal.
Yeah. You can remove a bunch. And, there's the argument of like eating healthy is expensive, Okay, we can argue that both ways. But at the same time, there's a cost to everything. Choose what you want to pay for. You want to pay for Doritos and medical appointments?
Exactly.
Or do you want to just put in the work and be healthy and
delayed gratification, man?
Yeah.
It's another aspect of that.
Yeah. I'll buy some higher, groceries and hunt, and not have to be in the doctor in the hospital getting treated for all these issues.
Investing in your future.
100%.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And even for spiritual purposes as well, to be effective for God and whatever he calls you to do, it's like you got to steward what he gave you, the body.
100%.
It's the temple of the Holy Spirit. It's not even yours.
Yeah.
Biblically, it is God's. Your body belongs to God. He died and it will be raised at the last day. And like, you got to steward this thing.
100%. And I'm very particular on this. Some people might disagree with me, but I'm still going to stand firm on it. I believe that as Christians, we should be the example for others to emulate in every capacity.
Mm-hmm.
If not, why would anyone want to know Jesus? If I say everything in my life is for his glory and that every decision I make is based, but I'm super in debt. I'm super unhealthy and depressed and have a miserable life. How is that attractive to anybody? No, I should be at the pinnacle of everything, and not in a performance-based type of way, but just I should be walking in victory. I should be walking in health in multiple ways, including physically.
Because if you think about it, if Jesus is the source of all truth, he is the truth, he is the way, the life, you know, and God is omnipotent, omniscient, has all knowledge, and we claim to know God,
Yeah.
but then don't know basic things about life or health,
Right.
or we know it but rebelliously don't do it. I think that's what's kind of most important. Ignorance is one thing, and we should seek to become, like God says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge."
Yeah.
We got to seek knowledge. And some people, like even the apostles, they're called to a path that involves great suffering and, might not have access to a lot of things. But generally speaking, if you got access to all that, and if it's all at your fingertips and you're not utilizing it, that's a bad example.
Yeah.
And that's not displaying knowing God
Right.
in a sense, who is the source of all truth, who is clearly guiding you towards truth and health. He healed people on earth of disease. You think he wants people to develop diseases?
Right.
No, he wants us to have all the knowledge to not have diseases.
And part of that is exercising one of the fruits of the spirit, self-control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exercise, dude. I think there was a study out. I saw it on YouTube from some longevity guy, expert guy. He's like, new study came out that it's worse to not do cardio for your longevity than it is to smoke cigarettes
Yeah.
once a day.
You told me that in sauna the other day.
Like, that's how important your heart health is.
It's
Heart
crazy.
disease is the number one killer.
Yeah.
Respiratory function and smoking and what it does even to the bladder and kidneys and all that stuff, horrible.
Mm-hmm.
That smoking and tobacco causes, but heart disease is the number one killer.
Yeah.
Cardio is the most important thing you can do. Light cardio, even, because most people don't do. They get into their car, they go to work, they come home, and I'm not talking about like marathon runner
Right.
do cardio thing. It's so important. So like getting into the habit of running has been massive for me, man.
Yeah.
For years now, because I had a fractured vertebrae in high school playing football. So my senior year, it was in Alaska on a mountaintop. I'm like, I can't risk having a lifelong back injury again. I have to quit football.
Yeah.
So I quit during summer training. And honestly, my coach was like, you would have been a huge asset to the team, obviously, but dude, I have back problems.
Mm-hmm.
Mine started in high school football. I completely understand what you're doing and I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, okay, maybe I'm making the right decision. So I did cross country.
Yeah.
And dude, I went hard. Me and my friends would vape beforehand, get high, and I literally started conquering mountains, dude. Conquering mountains to the extent that I think there were like 100 people on the team. Me and my 3 friends would go off and practice on our own. But we'd start together and the team would run together and we'd just do our own thing. And we trained so hard that my first race ever, I got like 7th on varsity, and there's only like 12 people who get on varsity. And I'm like, what the heck? Something clicked in me where it's like weed is a super drug. Weed is like a super supplement because it expands the capillaries, more oxygen to the, that's why your eyes get red, your capillaries expand. So more oxygen to the muscles, better bodily awareness. So I started rationalizing, explaining this. Like Wiz Khalifa would box and do all sorts of sports high on weed. So I'm like, okay, this is legit.
That's right. I've actually heard of this.
It was my success in cross country that totally fueled me using weed as like a performance enhancing drug.
Huh.
Yeah. So
For
then
blood flow.
that was just another excuse that just, that I continued to smoke and things started to go south internally.
Yeah.
Which are very subtle for people who, smoke weed. Like it's very undetected for a while what it does. But I'm so glad I did cross country.
Yeah.
Because now I can kind of run wherever I go, whenever I want. I'm a slender dude naturally, even when I've lifted for months on end, protein, everything, gain minimal weight.
Yeah.
But I would gain strength, not as much weight.
Right.
But I think it's a blessing, honestly. Everybody says it's a blessing. I'd like to put on a little bit more stature.
Yeah.
But I'd rather be healthy. I'd rather feel good. You know what I mean? So
We'll get you a gym built.
yeah, yeah, dude. Like you got it. You're in your shed
Yeah.
where the
And
videos go down
in
too.
the studio
Studio.
slash gym.
Yeah, dude. That place is legit. Now with the jujitsu mats, when I come back, I'll have
Yeah.
to grapple.
Yep.
But but yeah, bro, this has been a great combo. I
Yeah.
think we're like what, like 3.5 hours or so.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow. The sun's going down. Beautiful view here in Tri Cities.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a good conversation, and more people need to have these, and even just this has been healing for me, talking through things, and not to dig up old bones, but a good thing is like now we can talk about traumatic things from the past, and they don't, you don't get angry, you don't get triggered, there's healing, and it's cool to see what God has done in both of our lives throughout this conversation, looking back on it,
Yeah.
of like so much healing, so much deliverance, so much freedom.
Yep.
And through those personal struggles, and how we can look back and be like, look at what God has done.
Yeah. Amen, bro. Amen.
Yeah.
So it's great, man. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And we'll be having more of these hopefully later
Yeah.
down the line.
Right on.